Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Today we are here to see the Milestone 4 final presentation of Master Architecture Thesis by Rutuja Atre, our student. The title of the thesis is Towards an Ecocene, an Architecture of Hyper-Ecology. We also have here Cheryl Atkinson, who is Rutuja's main supervisor, thesis supervisors. We have Marc Gorgolewski, who is the second reader, and we have two external guests, Carol Phillips from Moriyama and Teshima Architects, and Marc Ryan from Public Works. And as a guest also, Marco Polo, our Associate Chair for Graduate Studies in Graduate Program in Architecture. So it's a standard drill, as you remember, Rutuja. You're going to be presenting about 20-25 minutes. Remember that, all members of the committee also read your thesis, hopefully. And then after that, we're going to have a sort of opening discussion, maybe first couple of questions for clarification if needed, but then open discussion that will basically run until 3 o'clock. So it's like a full hour. And then we'll ask you to leave. We will stop recording and the committee will deliberate. So if everyone is ready, do you want to start? Are you okay to start?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good luck. I look forward to hear your presentation.
Thank you. This thesis is titled Towards an Ecocene and Architecture of Hyper-Ecology. Humans have achieved remarkable cultural innovations throughout history, advancing society at the expense of ecology. However, the increasing population poses intricacies for future development due to the heightened demand for energy and material resources. In contemporary architectural practice, the widespread act of demolition and reconstruction results in the exertion of high amounts of energy, furthering the rapid degradation of the natural environment. The Anthropocene, as an acknowledged epoch, at last collectively identifies our responsibility towards the climate crisis. This thesis looks at architecture's complex relationship with nature, from romanticism, exploitation, separation, and energy conservation, to investigate the evolving human perception of nature and occupation of the natural world. The 16th century development of Virgin American land by European settlers associated the city with a positive value. The nature represented the danger of the unknown, labeled as the chaotic wilderness. The following Age of Enlightenment characterized the rise of modern science, emphasizing the individual. It viewed the entire universe as a mechanism, resulting in the rise of capitalist globalization. At this time, nature was regarded as secondary, developing an exploitive nature relationship with it. In the 20th century, buildings became standardized and furthered the human separation from the natural environment by relying on mechanical systems and losing connection to nature-based concepts and local building practices. After the 1970s oil embargo, architecture shifted focus to the current discourse of sustainability based on performance energy. And while such buildings achieved performance energy reductions, their significant embodied carbon and use of high-end products makes them exclusive and unrealizable in the larger market. In the 1970s, scientist James Lovelock proposed the revolutionary Gaia Hypothesis that viewed Earth and its biological systems as a huge single entity. The theory proposed a new way of understanding ecology, sparking conversations on coexistence with nature. Later, philosopher and environmentalist Timothy Morton defined the ecological thought as collective thinking, forcing us to invent ways of being together that don't depend on self-interest. Researcher Kyle Moe brings this topic to the scale of architecture, stating that the act of building has influence beyond its physical boundaries, having social, political, and ecological ties elsewhere. As building impacts are vastly greater than performance energy, a hyper-ecological approach makes the energy and social exchanges an inherent consideration to achieve an ecologically and ambitious approach to architecture. The following case studies explore the interlinked energy and social exchanges through a blurred human-nature boundary of separation, the preservation of existing built structures, and considering the entire material life cycle. Through social exchanges, architecture has the ability to increase compassion towards the natural environment and generate a sense of interconnectedness through immersive experiences. The Highline and OMA's proposal for Downsview Park create a social and cultural link between the public and ecology, embedding ecological topics into the urban fabric. Both projects also reclaim public lands through open and adaptable design, providing freedom of movement for both entities and encouraging engagement between the two within urban context. A holistic understanding of energy exchanges views the built infrastructure as a material artifact open to adaptation. Through a layered intervention, the transformation of 530 dwellings by Lacaton and Vassal improves the comfort and energy performance of an existing building. The revitalization of the National Arts Center updates the building and reorients it to pedestrians and its neighborhood context. The projects exemplify how minimal interventions can radically change the usability and performance of an existing structure. Energy exchanges also considers the life cycle of building materials and carbon sequestering biomaterials. The urban mining and recycling unit's design is formulated around the idea of temporary borrowing using ethical materials that can be recycled, reused, or repurposed. Similarly, Stock Orchard Street House embraces low energy, easily accessible materials. These projects make energy exchanges an inherent consideration in the design, establishing an aesthetic by taking a moral standpoint. The research informs that a more radical approach is necessary, one that first considers not to build, but to reclaim and reconnect. Built into the natural landscape and the urban fabric of two tower-in-the-park neighborhoods, the 1960s Ontario Science Centre is an architectural icon by celebrated Japanese-Canadian architect Raymond Moriyama. Today, there have been talks of the center's demolition. A decline in visitors and the large amounts of energy required for its operation indicates a need to refresh its perspective to meet the new demands of the site. This thesis takes the Brutalist Science Museum as a design exploration of how we might approach the act of design from one of demolition and reconstruction to one that preserves and enhances the existing built and natural infrastructures. The center is situated along the Don River, which plays a key role in the ecological health of the city. Toronto's ravine network is facing challenges due to expanding development that has led to excessive paved surfaces, causing floods and erosions of the riverbanks. Not unlike the rest of the city, the site is experiencing rapid development of residential towers as a result of the Ontario Line and Eglinton transit connections proposed. Also, the growing interest of the public in green spaces post-COVID-19 pandemic presents an opportunity for the Ontario Science Centre to become a threshold into the recreational ravine landscape, educating the city and the sites adjacent Thorncliffe and Flemington Park residents on Toronto's ecology. The bordering neighborhoods originally aimed to counter suburban sprawl with the tower in the park living concept for high-income residents in the Don Mills suburb. However, many of the original master plan's objectives were unrealized, and since then the area has become prominent for lower income residents and immigrant families that are often unfamiliar with the Canadian natural context. Residential and employment industrial areas of the two neighborhoods border the ravine context. The site is part of a natural heritage system protected by the TRCA, and the wetland is identified as an environmentally significant area. Although the natural landscape is not fully accessible, its open land provides valuable recreational spaces for the community. Busy vehicular streets are located to the north and east of the site, and a quiet ravine landscape borders the site from the south and west. In anticipation of the proposed densification and transit connections, the transformation supports the Flemington and Thorncliffe Park neighborhoods through a connected public lawn. The design proposal preserves the existing structure of the Science Center in response to the significant changes that the community and site have experienced since its conception. The transformation addresses the evolved relationship with science, technology, and nature for the 21st century that considers ecology as the master of science. The change of Thorncliffe and Flemington Park from high-end vehicle access areas to densifying lower-income immigrant neighborhoods with proposed transit connections. And lastly, the project views the architecture as adaptable rather than a fixed state to meet the evolved context and to continue to serve the community in the upcoming decades. The site consists of an extensive parking lot and 3 massings, starting with the entry building that greets visitors. Connected by a bridge is the symbolic 3-wing trillium flower building with a central open space. And lastly is the warehouse building that steps into the ravine with an escalator and is also surrounded by an extensive parking area. The existing building plans are organized based on the experience of the building stepping into the ravine. So level 1 is the topmost floor of the entry building, and the levels increase as the building steps down. The site photos here show the building's fully renovated glass facade, the brutalist structure, some of the enclosed outdoor spaces, and the hardscaping around the building entrances. The master plan envisions the site as a community hub and a living laboratory, hosting research, education, and social functions that strengthen the existing natural infrastructure of the site and maximize the use of the built infrastructure. The design reconsiders the following areas: the paved parking, the building facades, vacant rooftops, and building program. The transformation is achieved by exploring a set of design strategies relating to greening the site, improving the energy performance of the existing buildings, and providing community functions throughout. To support the adjacent neighborhoods and prioritize the pedestrian experience, a continuous public path connecting the site is proposed to circulate the public without entering the ticketed buildings. This includes a layered outdoor bridge and stairways to the Trillium building and an existing step outdoor pathway to the warehouse building. The repositioning of the center's mandate, program, and architecture to integrate the project into its context and create a platform for education and awareness makes an example of how architecture can operate sympathetically within its environment. The following drawings outline the program changes and envelope recladding of existing massings to insulate the building and update its functions. The entrance building will largely continue to host the same functions of greeting visitors. New exhibits on ecological challenges and opportunities of the 21st century replace the exhibits in the Trillium and warehouse building. In the Trillium building, a new education wing replaces the administration area with the glazed extension, taking advantage of the southwest-facing views and heat gains. And program additions of a greenhouse and market space in the warehouse building open the site up to community functions. For this presentation, I show the journey of visitors from the transit stop along Don Mills Road through the proposed building interventions to the West Don Trail. But visitors can also enter the site from the West Don Trail. Where the pre-digital period required extensive paved parking areas, an ecological approach reconsiders the valuable land and transforms it to aid the watershed capacity of the site and create an extended public realm. The creation and maintenance of this parkscape strengthens the adjacent neighborhood's relationship with their natural environment and brings together ecological systems, the public, and researchers in a shared space. To open the site up to pedestrians, the eastern edge of the parkscape against Don Mills Road is made more permeable with various points of entry. The parks program features ample open spaces which can be adapted to meet the changing needs of Thorncliffe and Flemington Park community. The parkscape acknowledges that it is reconstructed nature rather than a return to an idealized pre-development ecology. And for this reason, the boundary between the at-risk landscape and the parkscape for community engagement is maintained. The boundary edge between the parkscape and Don Mills Road is planted with a row of woodlands to create an expanded buffer zone. The experience of the site begins at the north of the parking lot for transit and car users. And as visitors continue their journey south of the site, the parkscape is programmed with increasingly sensitive landscapes. Social infrastructure guides visitors through the site and fosters community and learning throughout the parkscape. The parkscape reintroduces landscapes that are native to the site, such as open land, mixed woods, waterways, meadows, and gardens. Unlike the ravine landscape, these spaces visitors can experience up close. Various pedestrian paths are introduced to connect the site from east to west, and an activity trail is located along the perimeter of the park. Additionally, experiential water and garden trails provide program-specific experiences, and water infrastructure leads water to a retention pond with plants for filtering the pollutants. So social infrastructure such as the community stage and viewpoints shown here allow the community to reclaim the public land and learn about environmentally protective strategies such as regeneration and stormwater management. Moving to the entrance of the building, a two-story stacked addition on the entry massing introduces research programming and integrates the neighborhood residents into a mixed-use space facilitating social exchanges. Through the consideration of energy, the addition incorporates natural and repurposed materials to minimize embodied energy and increase carbon sequestration of the site. The first floor includes a cafeteria, a circular kitchen, lounge, meeting rooms, bookable offices, some classrooms, and also a larger lecture space, which are all organized around a linear atrium. The addition's open and collaborative atmosphere provides a platform for social exchanges, featuring experimental materials throughout. The second floor continues the central circulation and hosts labs for researchers and students, along with some work and lounge areas. This floor also has a large unprogrammed space that can be used for events and large gatherings, or can be further partitioned off. The structure, vertical circulation, skylight, and glass floor take cues from the existing building below, with a supplementary entrance separate from the existing center. The addition structure accommodates a variety and flexibility of uses, allowing the space to adapt to meet the user's requirements. The existing concrete roof overhangs are converted into an open terrace for this addition, where users can view the parkscape and interact with the facade's tactile celebration of materials. The terrace connects to the public circulation path, leading visitors to the Trillium building rooftop through an outdoor bridge pathway that provides views of the surrounding context. At the Trillium building, its energy performance is enhanced by layering the southwest wing with a glazed envelope to moderate the temperature of the concrete mass and increase the building's energy efficiency. Timber is used to achieve the grand space and highlight the structural capabilities of the biomaterial. The extension converts the inward-looking area into a light-filled space with unique views of the wetland and ravine, especially from the height of the second-story mezzanine. Located along the public circulation route, the extension provides visitors with a break from their journey through the site with a cafe and seating space. Programmed to incorporate community uses, the space creates a feeling of interconnectedness within a social atmosphere. Similar to the entry building addition, the area is flexible in its design and can be converted to serve different functions such as a study, gallery, event space, and so forth. The atrium extends onto the existing Trillium building terrace, where visitors will arrive from the circulation path. From the terrace, an outdoor pathway leads visitors to the warehouse building. The vacant rooftop of the warehouse building is converted into an urban farm, opening it up to the community. Greening the rooftop provides ecological advantages in addition to growing functions that benefit the adjacent neighborhoods. A greenhouse replaces a southwest-facing loading zone of the warehouse building, and solar panels are introduced on parts of the roof to generate renewable energy on site for the future operation of the center. Furthering the thinking of energy flows, a zero-pollution growing system can become an educational experience where visitors can learn about waste reuse and reducing energy and water use through circular practices. Urban farming cultivates neighborhood development through gathering and community engagement. The participatory programming increases the public's understanding of the reduction of natural resource consumption, creating a valuable opportunity for social exchanges. The urban farm supports the circular restaurant kitchen and the entry building addition, and program modifications introduce a market space within and in the paved areas of the warehouse building. The paved area, which is now with porous pavers, is transformed into community gardens and temporary markets in the summer months, where visitors can purchase locally grown produce cultivated on site. The urban farm and its market areas activate the space and open up the center to the community. The transformation extracts the hidden potential of the existing built, social, and natural infrastructure to enhance the role of the Ontario Science Centre. It considers the embodied energy of the building and site in all its forms, arguing for the conservation of the Brutalist landmark. The proposal works with found architecture and underutilized land to create a platform where elements of nature, people, and material are brought together in one communal space, choreographing social exchanges. The intervention updates the building and site's use, performance, and access, illustrating how the existing built infrastructure can be integrated into the social fabric of a place to support communities and ecological systems, activate the site, and catalyze future growth. In conclusion, the thesis suggests that there is no one single solution representing what a hyper-ecological architecture is. Rather, an interdependent collection of forward-thinking ideas can empower the shifting paradigm. The project provides a prototype for the Ecocene and becomes a didactic demonstration of how architectural interventions can accommodate the needs of the community and ecology to shift towards an Ecocene. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rutuja. Great presentation. Before we move to formal discussion, is there any clarification questions that anybody would like to ask candidate?
Thank you, Rutuja. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to me of the stormwater flow on the site?
Mhm. So the parking lot that exists on the site is currently flat and fully paved. So essentially the stormwater management would be down south to the site with sloping landscaping that leads to the center water channel, and which leads it to the retention pond that holds the water before releasing it back into the natural landscape.
And can I ask one more question?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, could you tell me a little bit about the actual original ecology of the site?
Yeah. So the original ecology, so the original ecology includes of a natural heritage system that flows through the site, and you can see it better in this map here, where it extends from Flemington Park down south and also from Thorncliffe Park over. So there's part of the Don River that flows basically right adjacent to the site. And moving closer to take a look at it, it largely consists of woodlands around the space with some open land, which the community is currently using for archery and other recreational aspects. The waterway is one of the areas of the Don River that leads to this water retention pond. Well, it's not really retention, it's a waterway. And it collects there into kind of this swamp-like area. And there's also woodlands that I mentioned and meadows on the site, which are all part of a natural heritage system.
Thank you.
Another guest, Marc, Ryan, do you have a clarification questions, or we can just kind of get into the?
I did just want to ask for clarification. Maybe I missed it, but could you talk a little bit about the starting point for the conversion of use? Is this a scenario that you've kind of made a hypothesis that the science center is evacuated, is on a new site, or has relocated, and this is a kind of substitution of programming, or does this layer on and with the science center? Just to clarify my understanding, what's the vision here?
Yeah, the vision is that it layers with the science center. The science center will be able to continue its operation within the buildings that it currently has. And then the vision is that there's additional uses proposed, such as the public that's incorporated onto the site and researchers to enliven essentially the space and use the existing built infrastructure to its advantage.
Do you have like a sense of what's displaced or what's kept? Like, just I'm trying to get some of I saw a lot of new floor plan, and it looks
Right.
like a lot of things that we would have understood in the science center are undone. But it's interesting. There's a blend. Could you just talk a bit about, like, are you like consolidating some of the science center education, or is that still remain mixed? Or
the education and pretty much the aspects of the Science Center would continue their operation within the existing buildings. So a lot of the functions they have in the Trillium and Warehouse building are their exhibition spaces. And the proposal here is to update those exhibitions to reflect more on ecology rather than these kind of displays that were, they have been updated over the years, but they're more digital focused, and we wanted to shift the thinking towards the Ecocene and more ecological topics. But essentially the functions in the building are the same. The entry building will greet visitors. The Trillium building has its administration and auditorium functions. The education wing is now closest to the views. And then in moving to the warehouse building, it generally had exhibition spaces and some support areas, which remain the same. And the new exhibits are replacing the old ones with a new market area that steps out into the kind of paved spaces to support the urban farm.
Thanks, it's clear.
Well, okay, thank you. So we can now slide into a formal discussion. Well, formal discussion, it doesn't have to be formal, but I think there's a lot to talk about. We usually start with our external guests first, so either Cheryl or Marc, if you want to continue, and then yeah, just kind of critiquing the projects or asking additional questions, and then we'll come to the second reader and finally to the supervisor. So who would like to start?
You can go ahead, Marc, if you'd like.
I've been nominated. Thanks, Carol. Yeah, Rutuja, thank you so much for the presentation. I mean, there's so many things that are so exciting about your proposal that I sort of, I want to like kind of give them justice to kind of work through them. There's like, first of all, I really like your reading of kind of the history of kind of architecture's limited engagement and engagement with the complexities of our contemporary world. So I think that like your starting points already about like also kind of going beyond, in a way, just thinking about LEED as a standard, but just like how we have to take leaps sort of way beyond and thinking about our built environment. So the scope of your project is super inspiring. And I really want to first also commend you for taking on kind of thinking that's in the building and about like just the ethos about reclaiming rather than rebuilding, and the ethos of like regenerating and expanding. Just like these ideas it's so exciting to see a Master of Architecture student taking on kind of built and site coherently together. So that's really great to see. I think your site is also really extremely well chosen because it sort of stands for so many things in Toronto's potential to kind of reclaim its relationship to the ravines. The site is so interesting. So I think it's really well chosen and it can say a lot. So from that perspective, I'm also really interested in how you kind of maybe sharpen a little bit just like the message in terms, because I think there's a really strong political message that's embedded in your project, especially since this is like a provincially owned asset that that stands on the edge of our city's ravine, which of course we have a ravine strategy for, but we have this enormous task of the ecological regeneration of our ravines as a whole, and then you have this provincially owned piece of land that's in this sensitive mix between a community that is one of very underserved, multiple communities that are underserved, and yet are also growing, and we have transit and we have urban dynamics all mixing together. So there's sort of like an extreme richness here that I think your point is really powerful. And I almost want this message to get to government. That means local government, and that means provincial government. It also means national government, because it's also affecting, it's about climate change, it's about housing, it's about everything. It's about inclusivity, it's about so many contemporary issues all woven into this site and your project, which means you have an amazing project. So I'm just thinking, like, part of me, and like when I was asking about the setup, because I think I've been hearing all these stories of like, people, talk of moving the science center to Ontario Place, or where's the science center? It has low visitation, it has, is it profitable? All these kind of questions. But the idea of making it a community hub, the idea of even thinking like sort of even bigger than that this is actually has to be now a place where the province together with the city, and maybe even this is like a three tripartite kind of thing, where there's a real exploration of what it means to be working towards the Ecocene, like this newly defined paradigm. And because it touches on so many critical issues, I think that's like potent. So I would love for you to kind of when you talk to the various politicians, and I hope you do, that you can kind of like maybe radicalize a little bit the setup of this, because you're creating a scenario that has to, I think, take a leap. It's a fiction, but it's a fiction that hopefully can inspire maybe politics to follow, about what it means to reclaim and reconnect, as you say. And so in that sense, like I love the project. And then if I was to just like offer any kind of observations, some of it are like about just things to think about, like because the nature of recovering, I think, this relationship to this building and site, like I think there's a few things that like I wonder about, like the Flemington community connection seems stronger and more evident than your Thorncliffe Park connection. I know you've talked about the two communities, but I wonder if like how you kind of could be more explicit about that. I think the Flemington connection is very interesting, but you have to deal with a setback, right? You have like an extreme setback through Don Mills Road, this parking, this oasis of parking that you reclaim. I almost want you to be more deliberate about like how you get through that mass of not only the parking, but also Don Mills Road. Like that, the measurement of that kind of space between dense housing and then the first encounter with the building is something I think you have to grapple with. I know you had some diagrams you talk about kind of community functions that are spread throughout the parkland, but I think embrace the streetscape of Don Mills. That would be like my advice, as like this thick thing that is basically a suburban remnant, right? And I think you have to be always thinking about density, like the friction of density of things within this vast, like what it means to enter this vast ravine, what it means to go from a neighborhood that's very dense, but is a high-rise community in a park, like to overcome that paradigm into something that is trying to get that social exchange that you talk about. And it seems to be handled on the pavilion-like scale in the park, but I just wonder, like, what else do you need? Do you need more tools? It's a question. I love how you're thinking sequentially from transit through, and then that really makes sense. But I would love for you also, there's the trajectory of Flemington Park in, that one that needs to get explored. And then similarly, Thorncliffe Park in, because that might be a down valley up. And I know you're thinking about these, but it's almost like when you're talking to politicians and community groups, I think you want to define those various trajectories in detail, because they're really fascinating. More about like the kind of sequential nature, I think you're tapping into a little bit, because it plays out beautifully in the building, the way you move through and down, and how elevation change and immersion changes. So I like that you're cueing into that, and there's some beautiful things you've done. Like I love the opening up above the bridge as a deck. Like I think that was a beautiful move. It's so powerful to be on that bridge, but to imagine being above it and hearing the real sounds and being exposed to more immersive situation. There's some beautiful moments in the plan and in the sequence, but I would love for you to just keep like thinking experientially, both inside the building and outside the building, of what it means to go from like community to street to this linear park, to enter a door and to go through, and how the inside outside gets like played out a little bit more in every part of your building, and how ultimately do you leave the building at the base of the river valley, and then are you into the park system? Like the idea that this is a very different way of breathing in and out. I mean, I'd love for your project to explore that. And the other thing about the Brutalist Legacy, which you talk a bit about, like I noticed the renovations of the Science Center, maybe Cheryl will speak to this, but some of the renovations of the Science Center seem to cover up the Brutalist Legacy already. And I just was interested in how like some of your claddings and things sort of didn't necessarily, they were also again sort of trying to cover. And I was just curious about like what's the ethos of that, because I like how you were referring to things about, you know, the adaptability rather than the fixed. Like how do you adapt and how do you embed this brutalist carbon intensive mass of concrete? How do you allow that to kind of live again? And I don't know, I was just interested, like, is there some stripping back that would actually have been interesting to sort of reveal that, like, you know, because we almost don't see much of that concrete work that was so beautiful in its day. Yeah, anyway, these are again our questions of how you work with, because I think it's the building's such an interesting emblem. So how do you work with the iconography maybe of brutalism and then the Ecocene, and like that tension even like somehow could be very exciting. The other thing you might think about is the transformative potential of programming. And today you've kind of done that in the linear park, I think really well. And it plays to that community hub and that kind of like, in a way, adding the amenities that every community deserves and the markets and all that. And I love how you have like a programming idea across the board. I feel like you could look and seek out something just like that's like nothing else in the city, you know, so that it's not another brickworks or it's not another thing that all the other neighborhoods have to make them livable. Like this neighborhood, yes, deserves all those things, but they almost also deserve something that keeps that destination quality that is just so fantastic. And some of the roofscapes I think are getting at that, but I wonder a bit about the water in the project. And there's some areas like the river, I think we know a bit, like we've discovered a little bit in the ravine, but there's the stormwater ponds and, you know, the marsh zones are secrets back there. And I just wonder if there's anything that you can do, you know, Carol referred to your stormwater strategy, but how you bring the water in much more like in a, I don't know, in a more surprising way, whether that also means swimming in some form or who knows, or even skating in some form. And I say that just because in the Bentway, for example, to kind of reoccupy a place that people didn't expect to be, the programming of the skating rink, for example, the skating trail was powerful just in inviting users that may not always get there. So I feel like that ability to draw people through your thresholds is key, and that there's rewards at every step. So maybe that's just something to continue to thinking about or highlight in the work you've already done. But most of all, I love your sensibility that you're taking through the project, and I hope you take, you know, in all your career. But the idea that there isn't a singular answer here, it's that mix of ideas. And I think the emphasis here is how they remain an ongoing mix of ideas, that they have capacity to be reevaluated and added to. That's, I think, is important in your generation's thinking. And in that sense, it might also overcome the idea that this is an expo of ideas or a static demonstration of the best of the moment, because it has to be something more. It has to be about how people join like a movement of change and a paradigm shift, because you're talking about Anthropocene to Ecocene. Like it's big. It's like, how do people just want to join that? So that ongoing thing, that this isn't like the Ontario Place state of the moment. It's projecting always, and somehow it's about cultivating. So you know, there's like, well done, wonderful work. Yeah, I mean, and just on the front, the flatness of the front, I also feel like you could explore topography a little bit, and that's a tool of landscape architecture. You know, like in architecture, it's like datums are flat, right? But there's something about when you recover a parking lot that's like this mass of flatness. There's something you could to register that change. I mean, the valley is all about topography, movement, and the sequence of kind of choreographing that movement. So spatially, I think how you kind of work with grading would be something you would, I think, enjoy. And maybe that's the next part of, you know, as you get more and more interested in sites, how water management and manipulation of ground is also like one of your most exciting tools, the same way in architecture using walls, and, you know, and mass, but in landscape, like, you know, the design of topography is something you will have a lot of fun with. And that might also help make a statement about why it's better to not have this parking lot. And incidentally, I think you should go all in on the change of use to parking. So that little bit of reduced parking right at the doorstep of the subway stop. I mean, I think you want that landing out of transit to be a dream, like you've arrived, you know? So I think you can find a way to get the workers' cars, like you have to decommission those cars. So somehow you can find another spot on your site plan for those. Just that welcome and that trajectory begins when you leave that station. Anyway, I'm going to let others talk because I don't have a sense of timing right now, but hey, lots of really great work and congratulations.
Yeah, thank you, Marc. Well, I don't know if there's anything to respond here by Rutuja or she, well, because I see she's taking notes diligently. But
yeah, no, thanks so much for all your comments. I think the comment on thresholds is extremely important with circulation and the community members. I think that could be interesting to look at in further detail too.
Thank you. Carol, would you like to continue?
Sure. Thank you. Marc has brought up a lot of topics that actually cover a lot of the things that I was thinking about as well. But first of all, I wanted to say congratulations, Rutuja. I think that, you know, I wish you could have left that aerial up a little longer for us to luxuriate on because it's a lovely drawing. And I think in some ways it sort of captures the spirit of the project that is trying to figure out how we sort of nestle into this landscape and how we readapt. And I think, again, like Marc said, congratulations on taking this on in a very sensitive way. These are all the topics that we as architects who are practicing have to embrace, and landscape architects, about how we work with natural systems and how we embrace what is there and adaptively reuse, and think really hard about what to take away and what to add to. And I think that that's where the thesis is. It's a very strong thesis, and like all thesis projects that are strong, there are many other avenues that you can actually branch off from here, or areas of concentration. And when I look at this image, I kind of feel that, you know, there's a bunch of ecologies at work here. There's a social ecology, it's a cultural ecology, as well as a natural ecology. And if I was to comment on some of the things that Marc brought up as well, I would even encourage you to be bigger, and to think of this, you know, in some ways like en route to an ecocene, you kind of have to go through the ecotone. You have to go through the liminal space of an ecotone, which is between two distinct landscapes. And so this image for me brings up those two distinct landscapes. You see what's happening on Don Mills, and then you see the river system below. And, you know, your project lives in this liminal space between those two constructs. And you want that energy to resonate between the two in a really symbiotic way, where you feel the force of the valley up on Don Mills Road. And then you feel the symbiotic, hopefully gentle occupation of what's up on Don Mills Road down in the ravine. And so I think, like, you freeze your design at a moment in time. And I think if there's something that you can bring to the thesis as well, as you, like I said, like all good projects, they keep going in a way, right? Is to actually layer on that element of time, and to think about the time when Don Mills Road gets narrowed, and when it doesn't need to be as wide as it is, and that you feel the effect of that pulsing between these two elements, you know, the human and cultural and the social, and the natural systems, and how they are actually impacting each other's edge in a really symbiotic way. And I couldn't agree more that the issue of topography is a really good one. At first, when I first saw the plans of the linear park in the front, But then I recall that there's actually topography across that. It dips down from where your parking lot is down quite a bit, doesn't it? There's like a bit of a gradient through there. And so it's sort of, that's another dialogue between this overlay of something fairly Cartesian and linear on top of those contour lines that sort of take you down, and that changes that experience as well. And again, to explore that, and I would completely agree to just go big in the vision and say there are no cars, right? And what I kind of like in this image as well is that it introduces that dialogue that I was mentioning, where you see a bit of a productive landscape down in the ravine in the form of the urban farms. But there's a way of doing that that is perhaps the way you've done it. It's reclaiming a building. It's actually enhancing the performance of that building in a different way, and it's not necessarily impacting the natural environment. It's naturalizing the built environment to some degree. You're making it productive, but that's also supporting the social context of this, which I think is part of that that symbiosis that I was talking about, right? And one of the wonderful things about urban farming, especially for places where there are new Canadians arriving, is that oftentimes, you know, when you go to the metro down the road here, it might not have the vegetables that you're used to buying or want to buy to cook your cuisine. This is actually part of, you know, kind of cultural erasure sometimes for new immigrants, that they just can't find the foods that they want to cook. And so this becomes a real social activator, a real amenity for the surrounding community, where they can grow what they eat and retain. That's a part of cultural retention as well. And, you know, I think so there's just so many parts to this that I think are actually extremely strong, that can actually continue to grow. And like I said, I know this is a frozen moment in time, but if this was to keep going and keep layering, I would imagine that Don Mills Edge becomes more naturalized, that actually you do just boldly say the road gets narrowed, there's transit here, and, like, you know, just one lane of traffic here and one lane of traffic here, if that, no parking, and that you see that thickening and that growth of the ravine up onto the Don Mills Edge. I'd also say that I love the original thought that Marc was bringing up about the riparian landscape here, and the wetlands and the little pools and the bugs and the frogs and all of those kinds of things. And one of the amazing things about the Science Center is that not only was it a pretty bold piece of architecture in its day, is that and a lot of people don't know this, but it's the way it was envisioned was actually influenced by, you know, a group of people, including Raymond, about how this place would be experienced. And, you know, it was bold enough to say that you can learn through play. And I think that as well can't be, that is part of the legacy of the place that I think could be brought to bear again. You know, as an immigrant to Canada as well, that's how we discovered Canada's weather and climate, is that we rolled in the snow and we learned how to skate and all of those things. And I think that element of play can still make its way into the project in a way that allows you to access the natural environment. And I guess I'm suggesting you create these pockets all through the ravine and just make the master plan the whole thing in a way. But and then also one other thing that Marc mentioned that I think is interesting is what becomes infrastructure for change and what gets removed. So there is in the thesis an additive approach in the buildings, and I do think that there's the possibility of some removal, and to understand how you can, in a way, remove things. One of the things that's happening right now on the buildings is the ravine has kind of taken over, and all that nubbly bit, all those nubbly bits on the concrete are becoming armature for vines and things like that to actually grow on. And one of the cool things about concrete, its carbon footprint aside, is it has this incredible ability to retain the hands of the people who built it. You know, when you see board form concrete, you can see the board, you can see the hand that pounded the board in, and it gets baked into it. So there is something quite wonderful in terms of its duration and its history, where you can see that legacy. And so there's a lot of things that can actually be taken forward in your architecture too, to see how do you add to that and pull from those kind of lovely things that are there. Anyway, I wanted to say, you know, again, other layers to the project would include kind of economic sustainability. So one of the things I would have liked to see is how, in a way, knowing that the center struggles economically for visitorship, is there a real sort of quantitative kind of layer to your thesis as well, where you can say, you know, this thing generates X number of dollars that helps to support the institution, or in terms of life cycle analysis and operational costs, I've turned this wall into a trome wall, so that I've massively reduced the heating loads in this area, or I've located this kind of program into this part of the building that's poorly performing thermally, but this is the kind of program that will thrive here. So that, again, there's this analytical layer that could come to the project as well, to say, how can I best use the artifact, or how can I best enhance it? And then, and that could be used in a number of ways. Anyway, there's lots to talk about, obviously. So I will be quiet now and congratulate you, Rutuja.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay. Well, it's 6 minutes to 3 o'clock, but we can extend probably a few more minutes. Marc, as a second reader, now it's your turn.
Well, a lot has been said, and I think I would congratulate you, Rutuja. I think you've done a very interesting thesis. I mean, I've always found these three transformations that you've identified, the sort of isolated to connected, fixed to adaptable, and pre-digital to ecological, really interesting as sort of drivers for what you're trying to achieve. And, you know, I was thinking, have you succeeded with those things? And I think, you know, the isolated to the connected aspects, I mean, I think your attempt to bring in the local community and connections with the local community, you know, they're not, there are things that we could discuss, but I think that, you know, you made a really significant attempt to do that. I keep coming back to, and I think we've discussed this before, the parking strip and then Don Mills Road, and it was, you know, Marc talked about the connection across Don Mills Road into Flemington Park. I think, you know, I suppose what I would like to think is the next step, if you were going to do a next step, would be, how can this start to project its tentacles beyond the site? How can it start to change Flemington Park, or start to influence? And you know, that's not just physically; it's also socially, it's economically, and it's you know, how does it change people's perceptions by the people that might come to it? So I think that works well. I think the fix to the adaptable is something which is difficult maybe to show, but I mean, I'm just trying to think about, you know, how is this adaptable? And I don't know whether you have there are clear answers to that. I think there are certain things which you've put in which maybe allow for some more adaptability, but I would, you know, maybe ask you to think a bit more about, you know, what does that actually mean, and how are you actually embodying the adaptability, and maybe not just that, but the whole idea of change and transformation over time. Because I think one of the key things with, you know, these monuments from the 60s and 70s are sometimes that they are so fixed in their time, and it's difficult to see them evolve. And, you know, science, this is a science center. The perception of science in the 1960s and 70s is very different than the perception of science that we have today. And I mean, you talked about in your document about, you know, the transformation from more sort of physics type of approach to a more ecological type of approach. But what does that actually, how does that get embodied in the sort of adaptation of the building, and what where it may go in the future? I also just wanted to touch on very quickly what Carol touched on, was the sort of economic aspects. You know, I think of it, sustainability as sort of ecological, sort of social and economic. And you've done a lot of work around the social and the ecological aspects of this. It's tough in a student thesis to look at economics from the various different aspects. But one aspect of the economics I think that you have touched on is the sort of how this place can help the economic sustainability of the community nearby through this warehouse building and through the food production and so on. I actually find the warehouse building maybe the least convincing, not because of what you want to do with it, but I just think it's the least developed. But I think that's okay. You know, this is a big project and you can't develop everything. But I think it's a building which, to me, offers a huge amount for the community, and I'd really like to see that evolved. It's not, I suppose, a criticism, but it's more a sort of, there's more potential in there, I think, which needs to be looked at. But I think that is one aspect where you have considered, or at least you are responding to economics of the community, not so much the economics of this particular institution, but how this institution can influence the economics of the maybe the new immigrants and the others that are living in the communities nearby. So I think that's one area that I would just I see more potential, and I think it could be explored further. But as I said, it's a huge project, and I wouldn't expect you to have time to address all of those things. So otherwise, I don't really have any further specific comments you to address. I think there are a lot of things that have been talked about for you to think about, but at this point, I think you've done a great job in making us think about the potential for this type of development, and that's really what the objective of a thesis is.
Thank you, Marc. And Rutuja, do you want to respond or?
No, I just want to say thanks, Marc. We've been in discussion about all the kind of drivers of this thesis, and yeah, those things always kind of came up and tried to express them in the final project.
Thank you. And Cheryl, as a supervisor, do you have any final words of wisdom for Rutuja or comments? I know you are the most familiar with the project, right? And that over the last 8 months or 9 months, you've been quite involved, but yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to say it was a treat working with Rutuja on this, and I've just been sitting, listening, and thinking of all the things that, I mean, we've been talking over the past couple of weeks about as the images are getting more refined and the text getting more refined, but I think there's a few things you could do to help address some of these comments that could be done through diagrams. And I think I agree that a portrait of the community, Thorncliffe and Flemington, to just represent who those people are in the document, because it's pretty hard to describe. So whether it was, just photographs of the community, that's one of the largest kindergartens in North America, next to Flemington Park, Thorncliffe Park, the public school there, because of the number of families living in those high-rise buildings coming down to the school every day. So it's like we want to take this overview and have some arms, maybe you shrink it and you have some arms going off that show where those people are coming from, because there's a wonderful sequence that's very walkable through the park to Thorncliffe Park, underneath a bridge and a series of parks. And then to the north, some images of the real forest. And Rutuja and I walked through that forest actually at the beginning of the project. And it's one of the few places in Toronto where you've got a white pine forest intact in the city. It's really undamaged. I mean, it is damaged a bit, but not like a lot of the other ravines. It's quite intact and quite primeval. And so to have some images of that within the document, it helped give you a sense of the wildness of the ravine more than what this shows. And then the park itself, where they have that crazy, some images of the frisbee golf course that's in the middle of it, and the archery course, so that you can kind of diagram the continuity of these activities and how this is a hub that has tentacles in different directions. But So I think those would be some simple things to do. And we did talk about things like making the connections across to Flemington better through islands or narrowing the street. But yeah, it's, there's a sort of diagrammatic quality to the architecture, but she's taken on so much that I think that's all fine, because that's all you can do with this much scope. So yeah, I think she's done a great job. Very happy.
Thank you, Cheryl. I agree also, even as a program rep, which is kind of a little bit remote, but I enjoyed very much not only listening Rutuja's presentation, but reading her reports and write-ups. And I just want to thank you, Rutuja, for your great work. So we are now 2 minutes after 3. We'll stop our live stream and recording. And we will also ask Rutuja to leave the room, and the rest of us will stay to deliberate. And then Rutuja, you will find the results if you pass and fail from your supervisor a little bit later.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I just want to say thank you before I leave.